Zdzisław Beksiński was a Polish painter, photographer and sculptor, specializing in the field of dystopian surrealism. Beksiński did his paintings and drawings in what he called either a Baroque or a Gothic manner. His creations were made mainly in two periods. The first period of work is generally considered to contain expressionistic color, with a strong style of utopian realism and surreal architecture, like a doomsday scenario. The second period contained more abstract style, with the main features of formalism. Beksiński was stabbed to death at his Warsaw apartment in February 2005 by a 19-year-old acquaintance from Wołomin, reportedly because he refused to lend the teenager any money and threatened him further life. Zdzisław Beksiński was born in Sanok, southern Poland. He studied architecture in Krakow. In 1955, he completed his studies and returned to Sanok, working as a construction site supervisor, but found out he did not enjoy it. During this period, he had an interest in montage photography, sculpting and painting. When he first started his sculpting, he would often use his construction site materials for his medium. His early photography would be a precursor to his later paintings, often depicting peculiar wrinkles, desolate landscapes and still life faces on rough surfaces. His paintings often depict anxiety, such as torn doll faces, faces erased or obscured by bandages wrapped around the portrait. His main focus was on abstract painting, although it seems his works in the 1960s were inspired by surrealism. Painting and drawing. Beksiński had no formal training as an artist. He was a graduate of the Faculty of Architecture at the Krakow Polytechnic with M.Sc. received in 1952. His paintings were mainly created using oil paint on hardboard panels which he personally prepared, although he also experimented with acrylic paints. He abhorred silence, and always listened to classical music while painting. Although he loved classical music, Beksiński appreciated rock music as well. Fantastic Realism, a prestigious exhibition in Warsaw in 1964, proved to be his first major success, as all his paintings were sold. Beksiński threw himself into painting with a passion, and worked constantly. He soon became the leading figure in contemporary Polish art. In the late 1960s, Beksiński entered what he himself called his fantastic period, which lasted up to the mid-1980s. This is his best-known period, during which he created very disturbing images, showing a gloomy, surrealistic environment with very detailed scenes of death, decay, landscapes filled with skeletons, deformed figures and deserts. These paintings were quite detailed, painted with his trademark precision. At the time, Beksiński claimed, "I wished to paint in such a manner as if I were photographing dreams." Despite the grim overtones, Beksiński claimed some of his works were misunderstood. In his opinion, they were rather optimistic or even humorous. For the most part, though, Beksiński was adamant that even he did not know the meaning of his artworks and was uninterested in possible interpretations. In keeping with this, he refused to provide titles for any of his drawings or paintings. Before moving to Warsaw in 1977, he burned a selection of his works in his own backyard, without leaving any documentation on them. He later claimed that some of those works were too personal, while others were unsatisfactory, and he didn't want people to see them. Later work. The 1980s marked a transitory period for Beksiński. During this time, his works became more popular in France due to the endeavors of Piotr Dmytrowski, and he achieved significant popularity in Western Europe, the United States and Japan. His art in the late 1980s and early 1990s focused on monumental or sculpture-like images rendered in a restricted color palette. including a series of crosses. Paintings in these style, which often appear to have been sketched densely in colored lines, were much less lavish than those known from his fantastic period, but just as powerful. In 1994, Beksiński explained, "I'm going in the direction of a greater simplification of the background, and at the same time a considerable degree of deformation in the figures, which are being painted without what's known as naturalistic light and shadow. What I'm after is for it to be obvious at first sight that this is a painting I made." In the latter part of the 1990s, he discovered computers, the internet, digital photography and photo manipulation, a medium that he focused on until his death. Family tragedies and death. The late 1990s were a very tragic time for Beksiński. His wife, Zofia, died in 1998. A year later, on Christmas Eve 1999, his son Thomas committed suicide. Beksiński discovered his son's body. Unable to come to terms with his son's death, he kept an envelope for Tomek in case I kick the bucket pinned to his wall. Director Jan P. Matuszynski's debut feature will focus on the relationship between the painter Zdzisław Beksiński and his son Thomas Beksiński. The movie's release is planned for 2016. On the 21st of February 2005, Beksiński was found dead in his flat in Warsaw with 17 stab wounds on his body. 2 of the wounds were determined to have been fatal. Robert Kupis, who later pleaded guilty, and a friend were arrested shortly after the crime. On the 9th of November 2006, Robert Kupis was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and his accomplice, Łukasz Kupis, to 5 years by the court of Warsaw. Before his death, Beksiński refused to loan Robert Kupis a few hundred zloty. Personality. Although Beksiński's art was often grim, he himself was known to be a pleasant person who took enjoyment from conversation and had a keen sense of humor. He was modest and somewhat shy, avoiding public events such as the openings of his own exhibitions. He credited music as his main source of inspiration. He claimed not to be much influenced by literature, cinema or the work of other artists, and almost never visited museums or exhibitions. Beksiński avoided concrete analysis of the content of his work, saying, "I cannot conceive of a sensible statement on painting." He was especially dismissive of those who sought or offered simple answers to what his work meant. Artistic legacy. The town of Sanok, Poland, houses a museum dedicated to Beksiński. A Beksiński museum housing 50 paintings and 120 drawings from the Dmochowski collection opened in 2006 in the City Art Gallery of Częstochowa, Poland. On the 18th of May 2012, with the participation of Minister of Regional Development Elżbieta Biankowska and others, took place ceremonial opening of the new gallery of Zdzisław Beksiński in the rebuilt wing of the castle. On the 19th of May 2012, the new gallery has been opened for the public. A Beksiński cross, in the characteristic T-shape frequently employed by the artist, was installed for Burning Man. In other media, the un-black metal band Antest used the trumpeter as cover art for their album Omen. Antest explained that they chose the trumpeter because our music represents the more broken and monster-like feelings of our humanity, like the apparition in this picture.